بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. In this episode of Spirit of Values, Dr. Tariq Rashid with you to discuss a very important value, which is the value of communication. What is communication? What is the importance of this value? Let's start our discussion with what we call the communication model. The communication model is composed of four main pillars. The first is components of communication. Then the second is what we call skills of communication. Number three is cycle of communication. And number four is levels of communication. So we have a four-pillar model of communication. Each pillar is composed also of four main components. Let's start with the first pillar, components of communication. What are the components of communication? Sender, receiver, message, and channel. So in a communication, we have to have a sender, a receiver, then a channel to transfer the message through and a message. What are the four skills? The four skills are: first is speaking. Speaking is a skill of communication. In such a case, the receiver will practice listening, speaking and listening, reading and writing. So we have four types of skills: speaking, listening, reading and writing. Now let's move to the third pillar, how the cycle of communication starts. First, it starts from the side of the sender. The first step is to what we call encoding. Encoding means transferring the idea into transferable message. This is step number one. Then we choose a channel to process the message through. So the second step is processing the message in a channel. Once the message is received by the receiver, step number three is what we call decoding. The receiver tries to understand the message to get back to the idea. Step number four, giving feedback. So we go through a four-cycle step, starting with encoding, processing, decoding, giving feedback to the sender. The fourth pillar is the levels of communication. Also, we have four levels of communication: three inner and one exterior. The three inner levels of communication in any organization or in a family, it's what we call, first level is top-down communication, from leaders to managers, from managers to head of sections, from head of sections to employees. This is top-down level of communication. The second is down-top level of communication, from an employee to a manager, from a manager to the general manager. This is down-top communication. And cross-communication between departments, between employees of the same rank. This is three levels of inner communication. External is with clients, customers, strangers. So in this model of communication, four pillars, each pillar of four components. So we can say it's a 4x4 model of communication. Let's go deeply in this model to understand more about the communication process and its components. The first golden rule is know your audience, know the receiver before sending. So the idea, you don't speak what you understand. You speak in order to let others understand what you understand. So we have to understand the level of the receiver. And in such a case, we go through what we call the variables of the receiver. There are several variables for the receiver we have to think of. First, age. The age of the receiver. Does it affect the way we send the message? Let's think. If I'm transferring a certain message to kids, or to teenagers, or to mature people, or to old people, would I go with the same methodology even for the same message? No. The age of the receiver would affect your transferring the message. For example, with kids and children, we transfer the message through what we call the playing approach. We go by playing to transfer our message to kids and children. What about teenagers? And the teenagers, they have the big I. We have to respect this big I. They start thinking of I am independent now. So when you transfer this message to teenagers, become a friend to him. Don't just came like this with contradiction. No, we have to be friends with teenagers. We respect the I. It's a temporary case being I. Then they will move when they become mature to the concept of the we. For mature people, open discussion, meetings. By this, we communicate the message through discussions, questioning, answering. But what about old age people? How can we communicate with people of 75 years up and above? There is a golden rule also here we have to think of. Now, with old age people, we have to think of how can we communicate with them. Old age people don't like to listen. They want to speak. So in such a case, allow them a space to speak. You just comment, you encourage them to speak. So whenever you think of the age of the receiver, you can modify your method of communicating in order to reach the receiver concept. The second variable we have to think of the receiver is the title or the position. When you transfer a message to ordinary people, is it the same when you transfer a message to a manager, to a leader, to a president of a country? No way. So we have to think of the position. Here we have to give some golden rules. People with higher positions, we have to understand they don't have lots of time. They are in a hurry. We have to respect that they are decision maker. So our communication with them is to facilitate the decision making process. While with ordinary people, we can go for lengthy conversation, open communication, and so on. So the second is the title or the position of the receiver. The third variable we have to think of is the culture. We have to respect culture. Whenever you discuss with different cultures, we have to respect the culture of people. And what is the culture? Culture is the summation of values in a certain society, in a certain country. When we respect this, we can actually communicate based on the culture. The other variable we have to think of for the receiver is the language he or she understands. So can we use Arabic, Indian, English, French? We have to think of the language because language is one of the main important variables in delivering a certain message. Then we come to the variable of what we call the interest. Sometimes people are not interested in what you are saying. So in such a case, communication will stop. Some people have a little bit of concern or interest in what you are saying. You have to modify your style of communicating in order to attract them, and you have a very high level of concern and interest. Those people will help to go through with communication. Another very important variable is the gender. Female, male, different in different styles of communication. So let's summarize what are the major differences between women and men in communication. Women are detailed oriented, and this is maybe this for motherhood. They love details, they need more details, while always men are end result oriented. They need the end result, while the women prefer always the details in order to get a communication with a female, give more details to explain, to clarify the message. Now let's discuss some of the golden rules. How can we facilitate communication between husbands and wives? Because this value is very important because it affects actually the children living with the family. Now, golden rules to communicate with women. First, women love details. As men, we have to learn how to give details about our discussions. So as much as you give details to your wife, you will gain acceptance, and she starts actually listening to what you are discussing. So give details. Second, women always appreciate support. What type of support? They need you support them. They feel that they are supported by their men, by their husbands. So give support, even by words, support her. Third, women appreciate gifts. Every now and then, try to bring a gift to your wife. Flowers, diamond if you can. So these are golden rules. In a very important questionnaire and study, they did a study, what is the preferable man for a woman? Not the rich man, not the beautiful man, if there is a beautiful man. They appreciate a man who listens to them. So again, emotional listening is a very important skill of communication. So listen deeply to your wife. On the other hand, how can women and wives gain acceptance by their husbands? How to communicate with them? First of all, we have always to respect that men are problem solvers. They like to solve a problem. And once men have a certain problem, actually they start not speaking. They feel some sort of deep thinking. The woman think he is neglecting her. No, he is thinking of a solution. Men don't prefer to discuss with their females in general when they have problem. When they reach a solution, they start the discussion with their wives. We have to respect this whenever we act with our husbands. The second type of give him the support that he is a decision maker in the family. Decision making, I know it is for both to make a decision, but always consult your husband before making a decision. So in this we can facilitate lives between husbands and wives in a well open communication environment. Another important variable to think of with the receiver is what we call the technical background. Is he or she engineers, doctors, HR, IT, financial? So usually here we have to think of what we call the technicality level of the receiver. And there are three different levels. For example, high-tech audience. For example, engineers do understand engineering, so he can use the terminology of engineering. Doctors understand medicine. But there is mid-level technical audience. They don't understand much deep in a certain technical field, and what we call lay or low audience in the technicality. Or in such case, we don't use what we call the technical vocabulary. This is in communication is called the jargon. Jargon is technical vocabulary in a certain technical field. Only specialists will understand. So if you start talking jargon to non-technical people, they will never understand anything from your message. So this is another important variable to think of. Another variable is the number of audience in a communication. For example, one-to-one is always easier than one-to-group. Assume you are addressing a speech to a group of people and you have different variables, different ages, different positions, different even culture, different languages. In such a case, it's a very difficult situation in communication when you talk to a variety of people, and this is what we call one-to-group communication. In such a case, think of the average, think of the norm. What is the average of understanding? And usually here we discuss the humanity values. Don't go to a certain culture while you are speaking in a group of people. Be diverse in humanity. Always humanity is the what we think of. So group communication is one of the most difficult type of communication. While one-to-one, I can modify my message in order to let the receiver understand. So these are the variable of the receiver. Another important issue is to think of the 4 skills, which we mentioned, listening. And we discussed we have 6 types of listening in the previous episode. So be emotional listener. Speaking, speak in order to let others understand what you speak. One of the most indirect skills is reading. When you read, I don't know if you understand or not, reading and writing. One of the most difficult communication skill is using the writing, because in writing you transfer the message to audience you don't see, while in speaking I can modify my message based on the receiver level of acceptance or understanding. So this is a very important also to notice in this communication model. In our next episode, we will go deeply in the communication model with barriers of communication, levels of communication, and this we end our episode. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.